The story begins in 1966 when David Menke and his wife Joanne purchased a deserted farm containing 198 acres. Much of the acreage was wooded and had limited tillable land. David had grown up on a farm about a mile away. Part of his family's farm adjoined this plot of land. The old farmhouse, which was built in 1900, had been vacant for years and had been used for hay and grain storage. Determined to live on the farm, they undertook a renovation project on the old frame house and within 6 months made it livable. At the time, their only child, Dawn, was 2 years old. Dave and Joanne were both teaching full-time, so much of the work had to be done in the evening and on weekends. Wanting to continue their family's farming tradition, they set about clearing land and building fences in order to graze cattle. In 1974, with their family having grown with 2 more daughters, Jill and Jamie, they decided to build a new house on the hill nearby. For most of 1974, while teaching at Washington High School, David worked at building their new house. With the help of an uncle and several subcontractors, they completed the project and occupied the house in October. They were able to salvage some materials from the old home, which had been added during the original rehabbing of the farmhouse. Looking ahead a few years, they began several conservation practices, including building ponds and establishing a wetlands area along the Berger Creek. In 1970, they purchased an adjoining farm which contained 111 acres. In the year 1975, David and Joanne welcomed their son Derek to the world. At one time, the family had over 100 sheep on the farm. However, because of growing responsibilities in their jobs, they decided to liquidate their cattle herd. In 1983, due to family health reasons, David's parents, who still lived on the family farm, decided to have a farm auction and move to town. The over-the-hill farm, containing about 100 acres, was kept in the family. A deed was executed transferring the property to their 3 sons and 12 grandchildren. Including this land, the Menke land holdings now exceeded 400 acres. Conservation continued as a main emphasis on the farmland. A sprawling 7-acre lake was soon built on the newly deeded land. Native prairie grasses were seeded in several locations. Wildlife habitat was improved as food plots were established for deer and turkey. By the late 1990s, the only true farming that was taking place on Menke Farm was the seasonal cutting of fields for hay. Over the nearly 50 years that David and Joanne had occupied the farm, they have conducted timber cutting every 15 to 20 years. Selective cutting is practiced, which promotes the growth of young trees in the harvested areas. Their most recent harvest was in 2014, when over 100 trees were harvested in a 40-acre tract of woods. Most of the trees harvested were 75 to 100 years old: white oak, black oak, and some walnut. In 1998, after 31 years of working in the field of education as a teacher and administrator, David retired. Joanne also stepped down as a teacher at the New Haven Elementary School. Knowing Joanne's love of plants, David decided to build her a greenhouse. This led to the next decision, which was to grow some plants for resale. Before long, they took the step to open a business which they called Indian Ridge Gardens. Dave and Joanne operated the nursery and greenhouse business for 13 years. One of David's interests as a one-time history teacher was the topic of early American history and settlement of the West. He was intrigued by the early settlers who faced the wilderness with nothing but a rifle and an axe. He had always wanted to build a log cabin but couldn't seem to locate the materials in old logs. Surprisingly, around the year 2002, he was able to find original logs from 2 cabins that had been in the area. Over the next 6 months, the cabin began to take shape. The final dimension was a cabin 16 by 20 feet with a porch along the front. An outhouse was soon built and placed behind the cabin. With the remaining logs, a small shed was constructed nearby. Eventually, a ewe and lamb were purchased along with several pygmy goats. During the next several years, the female goats were bred and babies were born. The Menke farm would again have livestock for the first time in several decades. As soon as word was out that David intended to retire, he received a call from the chairman of the Franklin County Soil and Water District asking if he would consider taking a part-time job as an education advisor. The job would entail visiting county schools and doing presentations on conservation topics. For the next 14 years, until 2013, he spent the winter months meeting students and teachers throughout the county, spreading the story of the wise use of natural resources. With age and aches and pains catching up with Dave and Joanne, they decided it was time to devote more time to their children and travel. Dave and Joanne thought a second retirement was soon to be in order. Recognizing that they are caretakers of this land for only a few moments in time, they have made provisions for the transfer of their property to their heirs. This is where they raise their children. The memories abound. They have lived on this land for nearly 50 years. How many more years God has vested in them is beyond our human knowledge. With this in mind, several years ago, David and Joanne planted a family cemetery near the bluff. Knowing that day is inevitable, their prayer is that that day is still years and years away. However, it is their wish that on that grassy knoll, they will spend their eternity.